Hi, it's Beth from the Kingston home. Welcome to our channel and to our dock. After some serious damage to our old dock bench, we were looking for something new. So grateful to partner with 84 Lumber to turn this into something we'll use for years and years. First things first, the demo. We used a reciprocating saw to cut through the old screws and removed all the hardware to get rid of the old bench once and for all. Because we were adding a second side to the bench, we needed a post to support the other end. Because we can't just drive another dock piling in, we had to cut a notch in the deck boards to mount the post. Find the appropriate drill bit for your bolts, then drill your holes. Drive your bolts and attach it, in our case, to our dock. And then we had once-in-a-generation flooding. Good news though, the post made it. If you are building on a surface that isn't totally flat or has odd-sized materials, create a level line for reference, then mount your first support. Now we could use the level to carry our reference line to the other post, then mount our second support. Use a level to double-check the support is straight, then use screws to tack in place. Drill your bolt holes, then use a ratchet to drive your bolts. Now attach your final support to the other end. Now we're ready to build our bench. We cut down the longest pieces of the bench frame, but we left them long so we could double check our measurements in place later. We used a piece of 2x4 to lay out our end piece so we could measure spacing for all of our internal framing. Make a mark every 12 inches to set your cross pieces. Clamp together the two long pieces and use the square to copy the layout lines across. Our biggest time saver was attaching a piece of scrap wood to the saw to use as a stop so we could quickly cut our other pieces of wood to the same size. We assembled the beginnings of our bench frame, then took it down to the dock to double check the measurements and install the rest of the framing. So the easiest way to do it is to put the screws in a little bit so you already got those started, and then you want to measure to make sure everything is square. So you can see how this like rocks back and forth, which means it's not square. So I'm just gonna take my hammer, tab it down. That looks good. And then you want to make sure it's also square this way, as square as it can be. And see how it rocks there a little bit. So we're just gonna tap it this way. And then we're ready to drill in the holes. To assemble the two halves of our bench into an L shape, we started by clamping the ends and then used a square where they came together. Marked down and up using the square, then we knew where to cut. The piling that makes up our corner post is the reason we made two halves of a bench rather than one large piece. It is also why we couldn't cut our deck boards at a diagonal, which you will see later. Measure the offset of your saw, in this case 5 inches, then measure and mark that distance on your board. Then use the square to guide your cut. Repeat on all 4 long ends. Put the benches back on the support beams and screw them together. Add any final framing and attach with screws. Now we're ready to cut the supports to length. Clamp the bench back in place, use the square to mark down, move the bench, then cut along the mark lines. Measure then cut the flashing tape to go along the top and ends of the support with about a 1/2 inch overlap. Do this anywhere materials are going to be touching. This helps shed water, which reduces rot. Put the bench back on, then add more flashing tape. Always work from the bottom to the top. This ensures the seams overlap in the correct direction and the water runs off. We installed the Trex LED riser lights and they were super easy to put in. Use a 1-inch drill bit to drill a pocket for the light, ensure it doesn't go all the way through, then switch to a smaller drill bit to create the hole for the wires to pass through. Then mount the light. We used Trex Enhanced Fascia and Deck Boards to build our bench, and the first thing we did was measure our first face board to fit the length of the bench. Ensure you leave room for the 45-degree miter. Clamp the board in place, then use the square to mark the screw holes. Use the level to make sure the board is flush as you drive your screws, then repeat for the entire bench. To ensure a good fit on your mitered corners, only go in one direction. In our case, we went counterclockwise. Line up the first deck board where you want it to be, clamp it down, then drive the screws. The TrapEase screws come with a guide on the lid of the box to help give you consistent spacing. To get consistent space between boards, use pieces of scrap wood. You might need to use a clamp to pull it tight. Our big tip, leave the boards a little long so you can get a nice straight edge at the end. When you're close to the ends of the boards, pre-drill to prevent splitting. When you're ready to cut your edge, decide how much overhang you'd like. We chose 1/2 inch. Mark it, then use a ruler to mark for your saw's offset. Then clamp a straight edge guide and cut. Remember what that terrible old bench looked like? Thanks to 84 Lumber, we've created a space with more seating, room to entertain, and a place to make more memories.